Shalom to everybody after a nice break. We are going to go straight into our readings from 1 Kings, Melaḳim Aleph, chapter 7, verse 40 to 50. We're going to go to 51. There's one extra verse, so we'll give you the bonus today. This is for Gillian, for that lady, for that one extra verse. Okay, Jackie.
And Hiram made the pots and the shovels and the bowls, and Hiram completed doing all the work that he was to do for Sovereign Shlomo on the house of Yahweh, the two columns and the bow-shaped capitals that were on top of the columns, and the two networks covering the two bow-shaped capitals which were on top of the columns, and the 400 pomegranates for the two networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the two bow-shaped capitals that were on top of the columns, and the 10 stands and the 2 basins on the stands, and the 1 sea, and 12 oxen under the sea, and the pots and the shovels and the bowls. And all these utensils which Hiram made for Sovereign Shlomo for the house of Yahweh were of polished bronze. The sovereign had cast them in clay in the district of Ḥazon, between Succoth and Sadathan. And Shlomo left all the utensils unweighed, because they were many, nor was the weight of the bronze searched out. So Shlomo made utensils for the house of Yahweh, the slaughter place of the gold, and the table of gold on which was the showbread, and the lampstands of refined gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, in front of the speaking place, with the flowers and the lamps and the snuffers of gold, and the basins and the snuffers and the bowls and the ladles and the 4 fire holders of refined gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner house, the most set apart place, and for the doors of the house of the Hechal. Thus all the work which Sovereign Shlomo had done for the house of Yahweh was completed. And Shlomo brought in the set apart items of his father David, the silver and the gold and the utensils, and he put them in the treasuries of the house of Yahweh.
Okay, so we're reading this section in 1 Kings just to highlight the similar pattern that we see in the Torah portions that we've been going through last week and this week, where clear instructions were given on what was needed to be brought and how things were to be made in the tabernacle, and here in Shlomo with the temple, and highlighting Hiram, who was given the skills to make everything needed and everything that was brought according to the design. And when we look at the tabernacle and its design, we see obviously the temple carried much more than what the tabernacle that was set up and broken down in the wilderness, in the journey through the wilderness. And the temple that was set up, the temple that Shlomo built, that David had prepared for, we see a lot of work that was put into bringing about exactly what David had prepared for. So when you look at the things that were brought for this temple to be built, David set the standard when he gave a contribution. And then it also talks about, and all those whose hearts were moved also voluntarily came and gave. So we see people were obeying the Torah because it was about hearts that are being moved in obedience to this, lifting up that which needed to be brought. And in this section that we've read at the end of 1 Kings 7, it's just a record of everything being done, what was done. And at the end of this chapter, when it says all the work which Shlomo had done for the house was completed, and he brought all the set-apart items of David and all the golden utensils and put them in the treasury of the house, and everything was made. And it was a great reflection of how when you do it the way it's designed to be done, the result is always something spectacular and magnificent. One of the things that stands out, I mentioned earlier the bronze slaughter place being 5 by 5 by 3, representing a slaughter place offering that is for all mankind, especially with the 4 horns on the slaughter place, representing the 4 corners of the earth. It's representing that our Master's deliverance that he's brought is not limited It's extended to all. And when we look at this magnificent display of bringing about a temple building that was to be set up for Yahweh to be amidst his people, when you look here, you think of the lampstands. There was 10 golden lampstands. I mean, not just one, and each lampstand with the 6 branches coming out and the center shaft, all with the 22. Every lampstand or menorah was built according to the pattern of the menorah in the tabernacle, but here there's 10, 5 on one side, 5 on the other side. Now, again, maths tells us very clearly that 10 lampstands of 7 lamps each is 70, which highlights again the number of nations, because 70, the first time that we get a picture of 70 is in the sons of Noah after the flood, and the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, as in 70 being recorded for the genealogies or the generations of the sons of Noah. Then we see 70 elders that ate a meal on the mountain with Yahweh, along with Aharon and Moshe and Yehoshua. So when our master chose the 12 to go out 2 by 2 to make taught ones, and then he also chose another 70 and sent them out 2 by 2. Some of those 70 fell away because when our master was speaking about, unless you eat of him, you have no part of him, that they found it such a hard teaching, even after some of the miracles that they saw being done in his name, and how they saw people being healed. And they brought back all these reports, and he said to them, don't rejoice that the demons are subject to you, rejoice that your name is written in the heavens. So even of those that were performing the authority of the Messiah, some of them fell away. So it's again a picture for us, although his commission, his work of deliverance and his commission to those that are called on him is available to all, not all are actually going to end up being delivered. For many are called, but few are chosen. Because so this highlights again, those that deviate from the pattern will end up not entering in. And so when we look at this here, this record of all the things being brought together, once again, Messiah is the light of the world as represented by the menorah. And we are called in Matthew 5, he says, you are the light, you are the salt, because we're his body, we're the branches that come out, and it's one source, one spirit that gives us the ability to be the light according to his word. We don't shine the light with a deviation from his word. We are ambassadors of the light that we are to be shining brighter and brighter and brighter to the perfect day. And coming back to the idea of the wisdom that was given for the skilled workers, the wisdom that Hiram had, that he completed according to the design. Here we see again the difference between building Yahweh's way and being wise maidens versus being foolish maidens that have no oil. Because without oil, you can't shine. And so the awakening blast is coming. And when it comes, will he find belief by those who have retained the oil in their lamps, guarding their lamps, and continually shining, not letting their fire go out, not trying to kindle a fire on Shabbat and quickly start it, as we said earlier, but actually keeping the light and the flame. That's why Shaul tells Timotheus he must fan into flame the good deposit. You know, that picture of fanning into flame is a picture of coals. This is a picture I get. If you have the coals on a fire, and if you just leave them, and as they get colder and colder, they can smother themselves out before they're all burnt up. But if you keep moving them or put some air over them and fan into flame, you keep that heat, you keep that fire going. And this is how we are to encourage one another. Now, I'm not saying go and flap your hands in front of people's faces and blow on them, but we keep fanning into flame the good deposit in each of us through encouragement, through building one another up, lifting each other up in prayer, encouraging one another, not to neglect the gathering, be part of the kahal, come be assembled, hear what Moshe is saying. Are you doing what Moshe is saying? I want to do, you want to do, we do it together, you know, that kind of, and this is what will keep the light in us shining. But if one lamp begins to go out, it can have an effect where the rest of the lamps are in danger of going out. And in Ḥazon, with the 7 assemblies, again, a picture of the lampstands that you see, and Messiah says he walks amongst the 7 lampstands. Again, it's a picture of the powerful, it is 7 lampstands, sorry, let me just get my bearings right. No, in Shlomo's temple, I'm talking in Ḥazon. Okay, so in Ḥazon, begin. I just want to get there. Because I'm highlighting the picture here that we see in the wonderful patterns when it says here, where are we here? Okay, the 7 assemblies, the 7 stars, the 7 golden lampstands. Okay, so here's another picture, 7 golden lampstands. Now the golden lampstands will always be in accordance to the pattern. Nothing changes in the word on the pattern. The pattern of the lampstand has 7 lamps, and we understand the 7 assemblies, etc. But the 7 golden lampstands were the 7 messengers for the 7 assemblies. 7 times 7 is 49. But with our master walking in the midst of them, he's the release, he's the Yovel, he's the head. So again, being the light of the world, and he's the one that's coming and inspecting, to be in the complete release of our master, the Torah of freedom that's been given to us, we realize all these pictures from the tabernacle menorah, which we've highlighted, the 22 almond blossoms, and even in Shlomo's temple with the 10 lampstands for the nations, and then ultimately the 7 assemblies, again, the 49 lamps, but with Messiah, the light, the one who supplies the light, making it a completion of a Yovel, the one who proclaims the release. This is a wonderful thing that we realize what we've been released from. We've been released from darkness, and we've been brought into his marvelous light, and we better shine like it, because the night is far advanced and the day is drawing near. And let us put off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. So everything that we're looking at in terms of design of the tabernacle, temple, the assemblies, the building which we are, it's all about making sure that we do not let the fire, the light, the life of our master be put out, but we should be fanning into flame. We should be burning brightly. We should be praising him. And that's ultimately what the design of the tabernacle and temple was, for the esteem of Yahweh to dwell in our midst, and that a proper praise and esteem can be brought before his face, where he can dwell among the praises of his people. So this is what we're looking at when we look at these, and we see the powerful reflections as we progress through Scripture, ultimately pointing to us as a body of Messiah. And having said that, continuing with this pattern, going from the Levitical priesthood as a reflection of the coming good matters and the change that took place at the life, death, and resurrection of Messiah to the order of Melchizedek. Let's go to Ḥazon, not Ḥazon yet, but let's go to Iď'rim. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1 to 14, I think it is. Who'd like to read?
Now the first covenant indeed had regulations of worship and the earthly set-apart place. For a tent was prepared, the first part in which was the lampstand, and the table and the showbread, which is called the set-apart place. And after the second veil, the part of the tent which is called most set-apart, to which belonged the golden censer and the ark of the covenant, overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that held the manna, and the rod of Aharon that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. And above it the cherubim of esteem were overshadowing the place of atonement, about which we do not now speak in detail. And these having been prepared like this, the priests always went into the first part of the tent, accomplishing the services. But into the second part the high priest went alone once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for sins of ignorance of the people. The set-apart spirit signifying this, that the way into the most set-apart place was not yet made manifest while the first tent has a standing, which was a parable for the present time, in which both gifts and slaughters are offered, which are unable to perfect the one serving as to his conscience, only as to foods and drinks and different washings and fleshly regulations imposed until the time of setting matters straight. But Messiah, having become a high priest of the coming good matters, through the greater and more perfect tent not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, entered into the most set-apart place once for all, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, having obtained everlasting redemption. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the defiled, sets apart for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of the Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim. 14, eh?
You know, this is a passage that we come to quite a bit and give reference to many times as we are in various parts of the Torah, because everything that we see in the service and the design of the Torah and the tabernacle service and the priesthood and everything that was to serve before Yahweh is all pointing toward Messiah and who we are in Messiah. So when we come to the book of Hebrews or Iď'rim that was written to those in the dispersion, we see that this was a clear witness telling them that, listen, this is now the order and the pattern that we are to live in. We have an earthly order and pattern that we can learn from and that teach us valuable lessons. But in Messiah now, those things that have now led to the picture of Messiah is bringing about a clear witness of how much more do we understand now the cleansing that his blood has brought us. And when it talks about the first covenant, it's talking about the service of the covenant in the earthly tabernacle, whether it's the tabernacle or the temple, and the service therein. It had all its regulations, and it describes the lampstand, the table, the showbread, all the set-apart place, the place of gathering, and then behind the veil, which was the ark, and obviously when the high priest would go in, you know, the sons of Aharon all did service in the set-apart place. In terms of the showbread, the lampstand, etc. But it was only the high priest that would go behind the veil once a year. And so when we look at this picture, and Shaul is describing everything that we see according to the pattern given to Moshe. And he says everything was prepared like this. And we're not going to speak of everything in detail now when he's talking about the cherubim above the ark of the witness, because when you go to the book of Ḥazon, then you're also given images of the cherubim that are around the throne declaring Yahweh's set apartness day and night. We see that in the visions that Daniel got. We see that what Yechezkiel got. So we see a continual theme of what the cherubim that were on the ark of the witness was to symbolize, which actually only the high priest would get to see once a year, or the sons of Aharon would get to see when they were wrapping it up. Again, we see now in Messiah that which was hidden from us in times past has now been revealed through the life, death, and resurrection of Messiah, who's provided a way for us not to just wait once a year to have an intercession of a high priest to cover our sins, but now we've been cleansed of our sin and have boldness to come to the throne of favor in our time of need, and not only just be receiving a cleansing, but actually our conscience is now equipped to serve, not with dead works, according to man's traditions or according to regulations. He says here that which is, where does it say? It says in end of chapter 8, when he's talking about a renewed covenant that he makes with the house of Israel and the house of Yehuda, and he write the laws in the hearts, quoting from Yirmiyahu. He's saying at the end of chapter 8, by saying renewed, he's made the first old. Now what becomes old and growing aged is near disappearing. And that's what starts chapter 9, because it's a letter, so it flows. Now, what was disappearing is the service that was being done in the temple at the time of this letter that was sent to those in dispersion, because he was expanding on this. This wasn't yet 70 AD when the temple was completely destroyed, or BCE of the Common Era, or no, CE, Common Era, yes. Here he's explaining that while at the time of this letter, there were still people in the temple doing regulations and earthly, those that hadn't received Messiah, and the service was still going on according to the various regulations. But that's something that Levitical priesthood that Yahweh found fault with was disappearing, because now it sets aside that order that was always supposed to reflect the pattern to bring in the new, which is always the old. It's the original, if you will, the only way in Messiah, highlighting for us as he describes all the elements in the tabernacle. And as we read this, our mind should go to the tabernacle and its design and see all the elements as we walk through the design of the service of the tabernacle and temple, and then highlight what it means for us in Messiah. That, you know, blood of bulls and goats, which were necessary as a pattern, as a means for Yahweh to be amidst his people, and receive them so they could draw near. All that pointed to this perfect work of our Master. And how much more then should we be moved to serve him with everything that we have, you know? And so therefore, it's not only a covering that we receive a cleansing. And that cleansing equips us for service. In him, we become a set-apart, treasured possession that's able to serve him and come before him and present our bodies as a living sacrifice daily. That is our reasonable worship. Any other worship that does not lay aside one's life to serve the Master is not worship in Yahweh's eyes. You know? And so I encourage you to read the entire letter to the Hebrews, the entire book of Hebrews, because it flows into a clear witness of what change we saw taking place when our Master came in the flesh. That it doesn't set aside the standard and the picture and the pattern that's given to Moshe. We understand that that pattern that was shown to Moshe on the mountain is now fully reflected in the work that our Master came and equips us with to reflect that pattern, so that just as it is in heavens where the cherubim is worshipping Yahweh, as Yochanan saw in his vision, so too here on earth, we too can bring the proper set-apartness that befits the house forever. Amen? Okay, so on that note, we can go to Ḥazon 11. We read from verse 1 to 13.
And a reed like a measuring rod was given to me, and the messenger stood, saying, Rise and measure the dwelling place of Elohim, and the slaughter place, and those worshipping in it. But cast out the court which is outside the dwelling place, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they shall trample the set-apart city underfoot for 42 months. And I shall give unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clad in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that are standing before the Elohim of the earth. And if anyone wishes to harm them, fire comes out from their mouth and consumes their enemies. And if anyone wishes to harm them, he has to be killed in that way. These possess authority to shut the heaven, so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy. And they possess authority over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they wish. And when they have ended their witness, the beast coming up out of the pit of the deep shall fight against them, and overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies lie in the streets of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Mitzrayim, where also our Master was impaled. And some of the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations see their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and not allow their dead bodies to be placed into tombs. And those dwelling on the earth rejoice over them and exult. And they shall send gifts to each other, because these 2 prophets tortured those dwelling on the earth. And after the 3.5 days, a spirit of life from Elohim entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. And they heard a loud voice from the heavens saying to them, Come up here. And they went up into the heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. And in that hour there came to be a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. And in the earthquake 7,000 men were killed, and the rest became afraid and gave esteem to the Elohim of the heaven. The second woe is past, and see, the third woe is coming speedily.
Okay, Renee's asking a question here. I want to understand what he's saying. So the high priest entered the innermost place 40 times. Once a year, so it was only for 40 years. I'm trying to understand, where did you get that question? We are told that every year on Yom Kippur, the high priest would enter into the most set-apart place. So 40 years in the wilderness, certainly, as they went through the tabernacle, but then as they went into the land, we understand that the tabernacle service would still be set up as it was set up in Shiloh first until Shlomo built the temple, but the service of going in once a year to make atonement for the children of Israel, it was every year, not just the 40 times. Sure, 40 times during the wilderness journey, or maybe 38 times during the wilderness journey, because the first 2 years they've got instructions and then they built the tabernacle. So I'm not sure if...
And I mean, there was obviously
firstborn will become
Yes.
high priest.
Yes.
So there wasn't just one high priest.
No. I mean, Pinchas followed Eleazar, who followed Aharon, then Eleazar, then Pinchas, and then after Pinchas, yeah. Okay, so I like what we're doing today in terms of the progression of the readings that we've done, going all the way from the Torah and ending in Ḥazon, the revelation of Messiah. This chapter 11 in Revelation sets forth 3 images for us. The reed to measure the dwelling place, the 2 witnesses, and the part that we didn't read, but you carry on from verse 15, is the 7th trumpet, the sounding of the 7th trumpet. So Yochanan was told to eat this little book, and that he was to prophesy to many nations and peoples and tongues and sovereigns. And in the opening of this chapter that we've just read, a rod was given to him with the clear instruction to measure the dwelling place, the slaughter place, and those worshipping in it. Now, the Greek word for reed is kalamos, which means a reed, a measuring rod, a pen, a stalk. And the reed that he was given, like a measuring rod, comes from the Greek word rabdos, which is a scepter, a rod, or a staff. And while it's described as being a rod or a staff or a walking stick or a scepter, what we do see is that this word is derived, a word that's derived from rabdos is rabduchos, which carries the understanding of the rod holder. So you have the rabduchos that holds the rabdos. Okay, so you have the rod holder that holds the rod. And what this highlights is the rod holder who holds the rod is the one that has the authority. That makes sense because the rod represents the authority, such as an officer or type of sergeant who would attend to the magistrates' decrees in Roman cities and colonies, because he would execute those decrees. So those that are in official capacity to exercise the authority. So this image that we're given here, that Yochanan was to go and take the rod, is a clear authority that he was given to go and measure. It wasn't just given to anybody to go and measure. Yechezkiel was told to explain the house to the house and make known its measurements so that they are ashamed of their sins. We looked at that not so long ago. We're able to see some powerful images and lessons that are contained in the very images that were given in this revelation that Yochanan was privileged to be given for all of us to then present the witness of this for us that we're reading here today. And given a reed like a measuring rod and the instruction to go measure the dwelling place, the slaughter place, and all those dwelling in it, when we look at all this instruction that's given here and we look at some of the corresponding Hebrew words that we can tie up with the Greek words that are used here, we gain wonderful insight into what's actually being discussed or given to Yochanan and instructed here. The Greek word kalamos for reed is equivalent to the Hebrew word kaneh. Kaneh means stalk, reed, branch, and it also gives the understanding of being upright, standing straight, etc. And it's used a number of places in Scripture, kaneh. One of them is in the first time we see, or a couple of times we see this in reference to the reed or the stalk that was in Pharaoh's dream regarding the famine that was about to come. We also see it being referenced to the branches that come out of the lampstand, the menorah. That is the kaneh, you know. We also see in 1 Kings 14 verse 15 where kaneh is described, where Israel is likened to a reed that's smitten by Yahweh. It says, Yahweh shall smite Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and shall pluck Israel from this good soil which he gave to their fathers, and shall scatter them beyond the river, because they made their asherim, provoking Yahweh. Now we begin to see the work of Messiah in all of these accounts, in a sense, as the one who through his suffering destroys all wickedness and establishes us to be built up in him as branches that can stand and be the fragrance of Messiah with his blood over us as we grafted into these covenants of promise. Now, kaneh comes from the verb kana, which means to acquire, to purchase, to possess. Again, it highlights how we've been bought at a price. And that Messiah came to take, he had the authority to lay down his life and take it up. And when we recognize this power of being redeemed by our master, the rod of our, the scepter, authority in his hand, as the good shepherd, we can see that the sheep that know his voice can understand this redeeming work that he brings. The Greek word rabdos, that I said is the word used for measuring rod, is equivalent to the Hebrew word matah, which is also a staff, a rod, a branch of a vine. It's often used to refer to the tribes of Israel. As we also understand, it's used to give reference to Moshe's rod that was given to Aharon as authority. So the word of Elohim is for all the tribes who have branched out, spread out, so to speak. And so when we look at the meaning of these words, we're reminded of our master in Yochanan 15 that says, I am the vine, you are the branches. And as branches, we have a responsibility to stay in the vine so that we bear much fruit. Now, the Hebrew word matah comes from nata, which means to spread out or to stretch or extend. And Tehillah 40 verse 1 says, I waited for Yahweh. He inclined to me and he heard my cry. In other words, Yahweh stretched out. To whom has the outstretched arm of Yahweh been revealed? What we're seeing here is part of the revelation that's given to us in this book of Ḥazon through the revelation that Yochanan was given for us. This Psalm 40, where it says, he inclined to me and he heard my cry, is a celebration that David is giving for Yahweh's deliverance over his life. How he waited patiently for Yahweh and how Yahweh had heard his cry for help and stretched forth his hand to draw him out of the muddy pit and the muddy clay, that pit of destruction. And this is what David cries out. He says, I've waited patiently for your truth. And waiting patiently is not just sitting around waiting for better days. It's being obedient by keeping our eyes fixed on the Prince and Perfecter of our belief. And he declares that Yahweh responded to his cry while he waited patiently for him, pleaded for him, and endured many trials. Yaakov says we must let endurance have its work so that we are brought forth as not lacking anything, Now, when we think of the idea of our master's outstretched hand and arm, we see a powerful witness here that when you see Yirmiyahu says in chapter 32, Master Yahweh, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. There is no matter too hard for you. In other words, we see a wonderful revelation to say that nobody is beyond being saved. But do people themselves receive the saving gift of life that's being extended to them? In other words, the outstretched arm and hand comes. Who's taking hold of that arm? And so while I'm presenting these words for rod, branch, that highlights the outstretched arm, the authority of our Redeemer and King, the Good Shepherd, and the authority of Yahweh's word, and the measuring line that's needed to establish his word, is that we get the idea of making sure that we're built up correctly as living stones according to his perfect design. So after having been told to prophesy to many peoples, nations, tongues, and sovereigns, he's given this rod to measure the dwelling place of Elohim, the slaughter place, and those dwelling in it. This is an image of measuring the house, so to speak, which we are. Because everything in the house, go and measure it. And in a time of a clear identification of those who are of Yeshua Messiah, this measuring rod reminds us, or can remind us, of the very prophetic visions that we are given in the book of Amos, when Yahweh was coming to see what's going on. And when he saw the destruction and depravity, he was going to send fire, he was going to send destruction and plague and famine. And Amos kept pleading, and he said, okay, I'll relent. And the third vision that Amos has given is one of a plumb line that was set in the midst of Israel. And this was not a vision that would be relented of, because Yahweh said, now, this is it. And this is a prophetic announcement of Messiah, the rod of our authority, coming in the flesh of man. And when he was born of a maiden and came in the flesh of man and died on the stake and was raised again, that's the plumb line. There's no relenting of Yahweh's clear judgment now and being set forth, and the measure by which he is coming to measure his house. And that measure is according to his righteous standards. So a plumb line, in the Hebrew, it's the word anach, which means to plummet, a lead weight or a plumb line. Now, a plumb line is a tool that's used by builders to make sure that you're not building skew, just to put it plainly. Not going into full details of a plumb line. It really is to test out one's ability to build straight, so the thing won't fall apart in time to come. And so our Master has set the plumb line in our midst. The word become flesh. There's now no excuse for anyone to not know who the rod of our deliverance is, the rock of our deliverance, the rod and authority under which we are to submit and be built up in. And as one goes through this chapter 11 in Ḥazon, the flow of the visions that Yochanan is given, receiving this reed like a measuring rod to measure the dwelling place, then we're given the two witnesses that are being spoken of here, and a powerful prophecy of these similar visions we also see in Zechariah. In Zechariah chapter 4, Zechariah was woken up with the visions that he was given. And he was shown 2 olive trees. And then he was shown a plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. And these chapters of Ḥazon 11 and Zechariah 4 can be used well together as a parallel study that highlights the work of deliverance of our Master and the clear standard of set apartness that befits the house forever. And that's how he measures his dwelling place, according to set apartness that's been established. And why I'm highlighting the opening of Ḥazon 11 is to highlight the vision that we can link up with the prophecies that are contained in Scripture. So what Yochanan was being given was not something new. It was an opening up and unfolding and unveiling of everything that's been called for. And the plumb line has now been made known. And so we see a wonderful picture here of Yahweh making it known that he has come to inspect his house. He sent many prophets rising early, but nobody would listen. So he himself, as his own measuring rod, the plumb line, came. Now, that's the standard, and he's measuring. And he gives this wonderful vision, and we look at the dwelling place, the slaughter place, and those dwelling in it must be measured. So what's being presented to us is, how is our slaughter offering of praise measuring up? So when we look intently into the mirror of Ḥazon 11, we should be asking, when we're told to offer our bodies a living offering, our reasonable worship before the Master, we see in the Psalms that we are to slaughter slaughterings of thanksgiving to Elohim and trust in him. We also see Tehillah 116 saying, I bring you a slaughtering of thanksgiving, I call upon the name of Yahweh. Tehillah 107 verse 22 says, let them bring slaughterings of thanksgiving and relate his works with rejoicing. Shaul echoes a lot of this when he says we must rejoice. And again, I say rejoice. And with all, give thanks in everything. Hebrews 13 verse 15 says, through him then, that is through Messiah, our plumb line, let us continually offer up the slaughter offering of praise to Elohim. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. How is your praise, how is your life of praise measuring up when you look at the clear standard of set apartness? Typically, in the temple, the outer courts were known as the courts for the nations, and it was a place where the nations were permitted to come and hear the truth, as Israel was supposed to be a light to the nations. And in this vision, Yochanan is told not to measure the outer court, and it's identified as those who would trample the city underfoot for 42 months. So this highlights for us powerful pictures as we see the visions between the 6th and 7th trumpet that's given here as a clear separation. So it's like just before that last trumpet. So we also get this separation that is highlighted during the days from Yom Teruah to Yom Kippur. In Yom Kippur, when that final trumpet blast is blown, when our Master comes out to fetch those that have measured up to his set apartness and have those that haven't separated for destruction. And so we see that separation is a wonderful picture that we see between the profane and the set apart, the clean and the unclean, in terms of those who are worshipping in spirit and truth and those who are actually defiling their worship and grieving the set apart spirit. And so what we see here is a separation or clear measurement of those who are worshipping correctly and those that are not. When he says, and those worshipping, the Greek word for worshipping is proskuneo, which comes from pros, which is to or toward, and kunio, which means to kiss. In other words, to extend one's homage or to extend one's worship. And this picture that we get strikes us a lot in Israel's depravity of their worship that was rebuked, when Yahweh told them to go and kiss the calves and see if that will save you, because they were building corrupt idol worship things. I mean, you even see in Catholicism where people are kissing some statue that they call Peter, and because they are kissing their idol worship, they are paying and subjecting themselves to idol worship. We are not to kiss the hand, because he says, go kiss the hand of that. We are not to kiss the hand, because that was a rebuke to a backsliding people. When Joseph was made governor by Pharaoh, and the authority that he gave him, he says, at your mouth all my people shall kiss. In other words, they will bow in subjection to you. You carry the authority on your hand. What you say as works will be done. The Hebrew word for kiss is nashak. It means to do homage, to pay respect, to have affection for, to acknowledge, and also carries the idea of being dressed accordingly. In other words, when you pay homage or you respect others, you're showing that I am responding to the way you've called me to be, so I'm dressed the way you've instructed me to be dressed. That's one way of understanding the kiss, the respect. It's in Hosea 13 where we see the following. In verse 2 it says, they sin more and more. Now this is a rebuke for Ephraim, the northern 10 tribes. They make for themselves molded images from their silver, idols according to their skill, all of them the work of craftsmen. They say of them, let the men who slaughter kiss the calves. This rebuke that was given in Hosea was for the men who slaughter, go and kiss the calves, because you're not doing the right worship, so go ahead. You rebellious and backsliding people, those who don't trust in Yahweh but rather walk after their own reasoning, must go ahead and carry on with your corrupt worship, see if it's going to save you. The reality is, as I said, we're not to kiss the calves. But Yahweh was saying, if that's why you want to carry on, go ahead. Choose who you're going to serve. But if we're going to serve Yahweh, we shouldn't be kissing calves. In a parable psalm, Psalm 2, it's a parable, a wonderful psalm that reflects the work of our Master. It says, kiss the Son, lest he be enraged, and you perish in the way. For soon his wrath is to be kindled. Blessed are those taking refuge in him. So it's a wonderful parable that highlights the Son that's born unto us is none other than Yahweh, who's coming in wrath to destroy his opponents, to those that have not subjected themselves and paid homage to him and are dressed according to his dress code. Once again, the powerful lesson that we see in Ḥazon 11 basically is in the measuring that is taking place. It comes down to, are you in or are you out? The time of 42 months, 1,260 days, represents the times and a half, the time and a half a time that's spoken, time, I might get that, and half a time. There we go, that one. That Daniel was given visions of, remember? And we see in Daniel's vision that he was given, we see a wicked reign of the fourth beast, which represents Rome, speaking against the Most High. It wears out the set-apart ones. It attempts to change the laws and appointed times, and they are given into its hand for a time and times and half a time. There, I got it right, sure. So we're able to recognize that there is a time when authority is given over to darkness for a time, times and half a time. For 3.5 years or 1,260 days, this is judgment language that we see, because we see this kind of picture of darkness and the darkness of authority. When Messiah was here in the flesh, he says, my kingdom is not of this world. We understand that our wrestle is not against flesh and blood, but against the authorities, the principalities, rulers of this dark age. But in Messiah, we've been given all we need to overcome when we put on the armor of Messiah, the armor of light. In Luke 4, verse 25, it says, I truly say to you, many widows were in Israel in the days of Eliyahu, when the heaven was shut for 3 years and 6 months, and there was a great scarcity of food in all the land. In Daniel 12, verse 7, it says, I heard a man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left hand to the heavens, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for an appointed time, appointed times, and half a time. And when they have ended scattering the power of the set-apart people, then all these shall be completed. So I'm not going to try to attempt in any way to present a physical date of these visions, which some are trying. What I am presenting here is the lessons and parables that we're able to see in all of these visions that I'm presenting, whether it's in Amos, whether it's Ḥazon that we've read here, whether it's Zechariah or Daniel. We're able to see that encouragement that we are given to be armed in the truth so that we're not shaken by the lawlessness that is increasing and the deceit of unrighteousness that many will be falling to. Historically, we take note and recognize that it was Antiochus IV that met the prophetic words and visions of Daniel of the 1260 days. This wicked king set up the abomination of desolation when he set up in the slaughter place in the temple, and he set up the abomination that lays waste. And his reign prefigures the reign of the anti-Messiah, who's given a time to rule in wickedness. Now, during this wicked reign, Yahweh gives two witnesses that prophesy for this period of 1260 days. And when we look at this vision that Yochanan is given, because it's the same choices that each generation get. That's the one lesson that we learn. And the vision of these two witnesses that Yahweh has given, in verse 4, we're told that these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before Elohim. And I mentioned Zechariah. In Zechariah 4, we see in verse 2 to 3, it says, what do you see? I said, I have looked and see a lampstand of all gold with a bowl on top of it. And on the stand, 7 lamps with 7 spouts to the 7 lamps. And 2 olive trees are by it, one on the right of the bowl and the other at its left. And then further down in the chapter, in verses 11 to 14, it says, Then I responded to him and said, What are these 2 olive trees, one at the right of the lampstand and the other at its left? And I responded a second time and said to him, What are these 2 olive branches which empty golden oil from themselves by means of the 2 golden pipes? And he answered me and said, Do you not know what these are? And I said, No, my master. And he said, These are the 2 anointed ones who stand beside the master of all the earth. The description that's given to us in Yochanan's vision helps us understand Zechariah's vision. The vision that Yochanan is given highlights very clearly to us that this represents the Torah and the prophets, or a better understanding as Moshe and Eliyahu, the 2 that appeared before the master, that was witnessed by Yochanan, Kepha, and Yaakov on the mountain when our master was transfigured, because Eliyahu is the one that was taken up by Yahweh. Moshe, there was a contention over his body at the death we read about in the book of Yehuda, because nobody knows his burial site, because it was Yahweh's desire. Yes, he died in the flesh, but it's Yahweh who raised him immediately. As a picture of his Torah and the prophets are the 2 witnesses that provide the necessary oil in the lampstand. So without the Torah and the prophets, the lampstand has no oil. And therefore those who throw out the 2 witnesses cannot walk in the Spirit. They are grieving the Spirit. Or the Spirit that they are walking in is in the spirit of the anti-Messiah. And so we take note that the description that's given here points clearly to the Torah and the prophets. And when it says they have authority to shut the heavens so that no rain falls, they also possess authority over the waters. It's Eliyahu that called for a drought for 3.5 years. It's Moshe who, by the rod that was in his hand, turned the waters to blood. Now, what's being presented here in this revelation is a time of famine for the word, as we read in the book of Amos. And during this time in the famine for the word, the Torah and the prophets, which clearly witness of our Master and Savior, Yeshua Messiah, is being presented. And those who have ears to hear must hear. But most are not, because they've turned their ear away from the 2 witnesses. And these two witnesses being put to death is a parable picture of how so many, under the deceit of lawlessness, have put to death the Torah and the prophets, claiming it's no longer necessary. And they're celebrating the fact that it's no longer necessary. They're giving gifts to one another. And that's what actually primarily happens at Christmas and Easter. Giving gifts for the celebration that the Torah and the prophets is no longer applicable. You know? And so in verse 8, there's another important lesson for us to recognize in these visions, and that was reference to the great city where our master was impaled, which is Jerusalem. Spiritually, it is Sodom and Mitzrayim. It's so important to understand this part of the vision because so many people today are failing to see this. We take note that many are streaming to modern-day Israel as if they're going to get some spiritual awakening in their journey. Now, I'm not against people traveling and trying to travel and see the world, but when they think that somehow they're going to obtain something by visiting a city that is spiritually Sodom and Mitzrayim, they are not going to get anything from the set-apart spirit if that's what they're seeking in terms of a spiritual seeking. Do you understand? And so Sodom represents for us the clear picture of whorings, and Mitzrayim represents the picture of corruption and enslavement to man-made sun worship. And the imaging that we're given here in this chapter of giving gifts to one another, celebrating the two dead bodies of the witnesses lying in the streets, it just highlights the corruption of corrupt man-made worship. It highlights the depravity of it. And here is this call to come back to hearing the Torah every week where Moshe is read. But even today, on Sabbath, Moshe is put to death, so to speak. And one thing that we take note of, we see that the two witnesses prophesy for 1,260 days or 42 months. And it's at the end of this time when the beast comes up from the deep and destroys them. And this image fits perfectly in line with that which Shaul gives to the believers in Thessalonica in his second letter, when he warns of the coming of the lawless one, which is with signs, wonders, and working of miracles, and how many are led astray because they don't receive a love for the truth. So when you've put the Torah and the prophets to death, you don't love that truth because the Torah is truth. The prophets is calling us back to the truth as a witness of the truth. If you don't love the truth because you don't want to submit to it, because love for Yahweh is to obey his commands, then you're opening yourself up for the delusion of lawlessness. And you'll be handed over to that delusion in order to believe the lie. So in other words, there's a period of time where it's like saying, that's why our master said to his taught ones, do the work while I'm with you. Guard yourself, because there's a time coming when no one will be able to work. So it's a wonderful picture here. That's a text that shows me that when people are looking for signs and wonders and miracles and all these things, if that's their thing that they say confirms their belief, then I'm saying the lawless one can do all of that. But there's a time coming when our master says, but his own people will not be able to work because of the work of darkness that is so thick. And so this time of falling away that Shaul describes in his letter to the Thessalonians, the Greek word is apostasia, from which we get the English word apostasy, which means a renunciation of one's belief and an abandonment to loyalty. In other words, people let their guard down. They start off very zealous, maybe, but somehow the pressures of life get them too much. And then suddenly the Torah is too hard. The prophets are too wicked, and it's too gruesome, and it's too, you're putting under. I had a guy at the gym this week. He said to me, it's all about love, and it must come from the heart, and the airy fairy stuff. And he says, but as soon as you say, you must obey, that's when he gets his back up. And I'm saying, if we don't obey, we're disobedient. That just makes sense, doesn't it? And so when we look at this picture here of Sodom and Mitzrayim representing where our master was impaled, sadly, many are being corrupted by that which is being sent forth from the so-called place where our master walked. Yes, he did walk there. But what's going on there right now is Sodom and Mitzrayim times 10. You know, the corruption that's going on in that city, the grieving of the spirit that's going. I'm not saying there aren't true remnant believers there. I believe we're all over the world. We're going to be taken there where our master will build and set up his throne and rebuild. I'm longing for that day. But right now, until our master comes out of the heavens, where he was impaled is spiritually dead. It's not alive. Where is his spirit alive? In you and me that have oil in our lamps. And what we take note of, there's a shaking that's coming. And when they were celebrating, and then suddenly after 3.5 days, these two witnesses came to life, and the people were all afraid and they were taken up before them. Again, it's a picture of, yes, call it the dark ages, if you will, where I believe every generation and has that choice. You're either going to be walking in darkness, where you refuse to come into the light, and you've put to death the very witness of the light. Yochanan says, I came as a witness of the light. It's another picture again of the witness that brings about the revelation of Yeshua Messiah. So when we look at this, are we truly measuring up to the standard of the plumb line that's been set by our master? Because if you claim to live in him, you must walk even as he walked. He didn't walk according to the religious instructions of the Pharisees, of man-made teachings. He walked according to the Torah. He declared that the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms, they declare me, they speak of me, they witness of me. And most didn't want to hear. So when we look at this chapter, then it goes on to the sounding of the seventh trumpet. But when we see this picture here and this, what we've read today, it comes back again to the pattern, the kahal, the body. You're either in or you're out. There is a measuring line. Our master has given us that measuring rod by which we are to measure our lives, look intently into the word, and we're either according to his pattern or we're not. And so there are many who are going to be weeping and gnashing their teeth when they are rejected by the master because they followed the depravity of lawlessness, the delusion of lawlessness, and the spirit of the anti-Messiah that denies our master has come to establish a reign that is in set apartness according to his Torah. Any thoughts on this passage? Anything stand out for you? I love the book of Revelation. It really is. It's exactly that. It's a revelation of Messiah. It's not something, it is something to be trembling at, because what's coming is not some little quick show. It's his wrath that's coming. And what's preceding that is judgments and seals that are opened and trumpets that are sounded to separate the righteous from the unrighteous, the set apart from the profane. And he who is righteous is commanded to continue to be more righteous, and he who is set apart to be more set apart. So when we see this plumb line that is not relented of, as in the book of Amos, and we see the measuring rod, and we see the design of the tabernacle and everything that's given to us in its perfect design, none of us have an excuse. But you know how we uphold the measuring of our master to its perfection? By not putting the Torah and the prophets to death, but actually listening very carefully to the words of Moshe and the prophets. So then when we come to the witness that's given as a further witness in the renewed writings, as a commentary of this, we understand it. Amen. Okay, any thoughts on this passage? I think lots to consider.
In scripture says, when Yeshua says, follow me, if everything was done to you.
But that's exactly it. Man.
How do they think? Or do they?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the delusion of lawlessness that the spirit of the anti-Messiah brings, because it presents the doctrine of lawlessness that's a doctrine of demons. That's pictured as the frogs that come out in the visions that Yochanan is also given. Because when you've come to the truth and you understand the truth, we look back and say, how can you not get that? But when you're in that delusion, you believe it, and then you hand it over. So it actually comes down to Yahweh can see already the heart that can receive his word and the heart that's resistant to his word. And those that are resistant to his word because they don't receive a love for the truth, because they don't actually seek him to know more, what are they seeking actually? Is gratification of the flesh. Because that's what man-made worship does. It feeds the desires of the flesh, the emotions, as opposed to getting our emotions in line with how we are to serve him in set-apartness and truth and humble ourselves before him. And I think it's a question that we can sit and go, I mean, we were once in darkness, and when coming out of it, we've got to ask ourselves, when we get the revelation knowledge and the growing of that revelation knowledge, we sit here and we think, how do you read that and not see it? Messiah certainly didn't eat that which was unclean. He kept the Sabbath. He went to the synagogue, the kahal, the ecclesia, every Sabbath, where Moshe was read, and he taught. What did he teach? He taught Moshe. He opened the scrolls and read from the prophets, declared who he is. And yet, man has a way of thinking, I don't need that which is from above. I can decide how I want to do it, but yet I want the benefits that come from above. That's what they...
I was thinking about, when I read about Shlomo making 10 lampstands, and I was thinking about, we're so pressing the point that you must do exactly as the pattern.
Yeah.
And I mean, what he built was not what Yahweh instructed. And I just thought, okay, well, but then in his prayer, he says, I know that you don't dwell in a house. I'm building a house for your name. But when we come to this house, will you hear in the heavens?
Yeah.
So it's like, but then I was thinking, it's like he almost built it knowing Yahweh wasn't going to dwell there. Yeah, I mean, he knew Yahweh was bigger than that.
Yes.
But Moshe built the tabernacle so that Yahweh can come down and dwell. It wasn't for the name of Yahweh, it was for the presence of Yahweh. But I mean, Yahweh allowed Shlomo to build a house for his name because it was still a witness to the nations. But he wasn't going to dwell there because Shlomo built houses for the mighty one of everyone, his wives, each one of his wives.
Yeah, later on, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't long when Yahweh was wrath with Shlomo because she started worshipping everywhere and burning incense. And it just got me thinking about, because I mean, we can see the positives in what we're reading in history, but was what he built really what Yahweh wanted? His heart was in the right place. Like David's heart, Yahweh said to David, I know it's in your heart. It's good that it's in your heart, but I'm going to let you build a house for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But is that, because when he comes again, he's going to rebuild the tabernacle of David, which was the tent that he set up with worship 24/7.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I've got answers for everything, but you start thinking, if you don't do exactly that, house for the name of Yahweh was never where Yahweh's presence was. His presence was in the hearts of the people who served him in spirit and truth. He left already when, in the days of Eli. If you understand what I'm saying. I mean, I know I'm waffling on a bit, but I'm just trying to say, like we say with people who read this, sometimes you read it and you don't really think about the implication when Yeshua says, follow me, be like I am. It sometimes comes down to, okay, I'll follow you because I'm getting something out of it, or like the Christian selfish religion is, what can I get out of it?
Yeah.
I get this mighty one in heaven that must jump when I snap my fingers, you know, which is not who Yahweh is. So if we don't follow the exact, it's all the intention of the heart. What is it that you want from what you're doing? Do you want your own way, or do you want to have Yahweh with you?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the difference now from the tabernacle to the temple, It's in 1 Chronicles 28, verse 18, where David had been preparing, and he said, see now, for Yahweh has chosen, this is in 1 Chronicles or Divrei Hayamim Aleph, chapter 28, from verse 10. See now, for Yahweh has chosen you to build a house for the set-apart place. Be strong and do it. And David gave his son Shlomo the plans for the porch and its houses and its treasuries and its upper rooms, its inner rooms, the place of atonement, the plans for all that he had by the Spirit of the courtyards of the house of Yahweh, all the rooms all around, and all the treasuries of the house, the treasuries of the set-apart gifts for the divisions of the priests, the Levites, for all the workers' service, for the house of Yahweh, and for all the vessels of service in the house of Yahweh, even gold by weight, for utensils of gold, for all utensils used in every kind of service, for silver utensils, silver by weight, utensils used in every kind of service, the weight for the lampstands of gold, their lamps of gold by weight for each lampstand and its lamp, and for the lampstands of silver by weight, for the lampstands and its lamps according to the use of each lampstand, and by weight of gold for the tables of the showbread for each. So I'm just highlighting, there was a new pattern that Yahweh showed David. I just wanted to make that clear. So Shlomo didn't deviate from what Moshe was given. It's still the pattern because you have the showbread, the menorah, the slaughter place of incense, but the temple represented an establishment even further. We learn lessons from that. The fact is, Hiram did what was shown to David to give to Shlomo as instruction. So there was instructed to be more lampstands and more showbread tables. Just what?
I think when I read his prayer and he's like, I built a house for your name.
Yes.
Will you hear from the heavens?
Yeah.
Almost like he never expected Yahweh to dwell in that house. I mean, maybe it's just because he knew that Yahweh doesn't need a house to dwell.
Yes, yeah.
So I know it's not the. Again, it's like you say, it's not about the
building, it's about the people.
And the building and the marble and the gold and the power. Because, I mean, Yeshua's disciples said, look how magnificent this building is. It's not about that. It's about the presence of God.
But when we are a reflection, I think in the millennial reign, what will be established will be beyond what the tabernacle or the temple could actually. That's why when we see Yechezkel's vision, sometimes you read that and you think how does the thing be so high? And how, because we can't fully grasp the brilliance of it. And one day we will be able to,
Yeah, but sometimes you marvel at that.
Yes.
I was just thinking about all the pagan temples in this world and how beautiful they are.
Yes.
People go there and that's the purpose of visiting.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's the,
it's all going to be turned over. Yeah. Ricardo's online with us after lunch. Shalom, Ricardo, from Limpopo. I hope you go and look at earlier session today later. It would be great to catch up. The light of Messiah, he says, are for those who are inside the house, recognizes Yahweh as the head of the house by obeying his Torah and right ruling, which starts with the Sabbath, where we learn the pattern, the lengths, the widths, the heights of the house, and be protected by it as long as we trust, believe, and esteem Yahweh El Shaddai. Praise Yahweh. So there's the balance. We learn all the articles, all the measurements of all the objects, and the articles or the utensils, everything that's in the tabernacle. But it's not necessarily about them itself. There's meticulous study and understanding of what each part entails and what it was used for, because it's a pattern of who we are as a body, and each part must do its work. And each part must be made or shaped or worked according to Yahweh's design, which all of that is supposed to teach us parable lessons on how we reflect the image and likeness of Elohim in a world that rejects him, And I think Shlomo is probably one, you look at his life and it just shows how you can be set up for such success, but yet still fail. And it's a warning for us not to fall from steadfastness. That's another lesson that we take, And Ricardo is saying, my dad also says shalom. Shalom to you, Henry. We miss you guys. And we're just thankful that Yahweh's spreading the branches all over. So keep shining. So I think the bottom line is, maybe what you were trying to say is that sometimes, I said earlier that when we look at the pictograph of Beit, it's the house or the tent, but it's more the plan. It's the living stones. It's not about the structure itself. It's about the people in it. And we, the people in the dwelling place of Elohim, are its structure. As we understand the lessons of being built up as living stones, then we learn through the Torah about the house, the Torah of the house. And when one stone is leprous and it's scrubbed and it's removed, we must learn through all this pattern. On the physical side of it, there were certain ordinations that we read about now in Hebrews 9, that it had all its regulations and all its things, which we are doing well to learn, because it teaches us how there are still very clear regulations of set apartness in Messiah. So the regulations of set apartness hasn't been done away with. The application is now no longer in a showbread table physically there, or a lampstand or a slaughter place. It's in us shining that light and how we practically live that out in obedience to his word. So we see a progression of revelation, maybe. So you got Moshe was given a pattern, they did it exactly. David was given a pattern, Shlomo did it exactly. It's still the same service, it's still the same thread of design, if you will. Now in Messiah, that same thread of design is still there. How we approach, what we understand. I've always said to you, as you picture in your mind walking in the gate or the door and you see the slaughter place and you see the bronze slave, it teaches us how we daily living sacrifice, wash our hands and feet, wash our works, our walk, keep clean, looking in the mirror, having appointed times where we come to the table of our master, and the vessels that are used, we are vessels. So again, we must take serious how we come to the table. We don't just come in and we haven't been a vessel that's actually been shaped and prepared and set apart for service to the master. You know, you wouldn't have in the showbread table a golden vessels and everything else, and then this tin that's been beaten 6 ways to none also on the table, and it's, oh yeah, there's that, and the priest will come in and, well, what's that one there? You know what I mean? So we learn from these things about how order must be maintained.
So that guy who said Sarah must obey, he obviously doesn't have kids.
He has a 7-year-old.
Ask him how he would feel if his son said, didn't you say obey? I'm not going to do
it. Yeah. We've all tried that, haven't we? I mean, let's be honest. We've all been in our tantruming, rebellious phases. Some are still in them. Some take longer to get out than others, I suppose, or we go in and out. I don't know. But what we got to learn is to not be rebellious. I mean, that's because rebellion and backsliding go hand in hand, where submission and obedience go hand in hand. It's either or. Okay, so that's our readings for today. I hope everybody continues to have a blessed Sabbath wherever you are. And we look forward to being together again next Shabbat. And as you go out in the week, go out equipped to keep shining the light of our Master. In whatever you do, is to the esteem and praise of our Master. Because remember, wherever you are, you're representing the dwelling of Yahweh. And sometimes I think we need to stop for a moment and just think about that. Wherever we are, as a functional part of his body, his house, we're to represent him and be a reflection of him wherever we are. And not only when we're all gathered together, because that's just bringing everything together in celebration. But the work of being a messenger, an ambassador, is when we're out there as individual parts of a body and then celebrate the work that we've been doing in him with the talents and gifts we've been given when we come to sit at his table, be refreshed, and be further equipped to keep going out and serving. And that's the cyclical pattern that we must follow. And when we do it his way, it's easy, actually. What makes it hard is when we are allowing the dross of the flesh to hinder our progress. Carol saying, praise to Yahweh, our Elohim, for his very clear pattern. May our Elohim and Redeemer continue to strengthen us, to be steadfast and immovable, proclaiming his truth wherever we are. Yigdal Yahweh. Make Yahweh great. Okay, everybody. On that note, we will be saying shalom, shalom, let me pray. Master Yahweh, we thank you that we can sit at your word, in your word, and we can be together in your presence. We thank you that you've taken us on a wonderful journey from your Torah all the way to Revelation with a clear thread of your pattern of obedience being very obvious to us, and that is one of set apartness according to your word, and anything beyond your word is something that can be presented as an abominable worship which would not be received. Our desire is to please you and to continue pleasing you as we strive and pursue set apartness, because we know without that we will not see you, and we long to see you. So I pray that you guard our hearts and minds, and that you teach us to keep running with endurance this race that is set before us. We know that there's lots that we need to endure, and it's you who gives us the strength to overcome and endure everything that we face, that you will not give us anything beyond our ability to overcome. But we thank you that you've given us your truth that sets us free, not only to run this race, but in running this race, we are equipped to encourage one another. And I pray that you help us to do that. And we do ask that by your Spirit, you add to us those that are being saved, those that are hungering for your righteousness, those that are seeking your wisdom, so that you can impart to us and others more of your wisdom, so that we can be skilled workmen in everything that we do to your praise and esteem. In the name of Yahushua, our Messiah. Amen and amen.